Okay, everyone. I know folks are busy people, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jim McCabe. I'm Senior Director of Standards Facilitation at the American National Standards Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today for our virtual meeting on standardization and the commercial space industry. We're going to be focusing specifically on space situational and domain awareness, space traffic coordination and management, and orbital debris mitigation. Just a few housekeeping items to get us started. All attendees are muted on entry. When we get to the question and answer period, you can do one of two things to ask a question or make a comment. You can type your question or comment into the chat. If you do so, please send it to all panelists. That way, both the moderator and the panelists, as well as staff, will be able to see it. Alternatively, you can use the raised hand feature in the participants panel to speak. And in such case, staff will individually unmute you and call upon you to speak. If you do use the raised hand feature, please make sure to put it down again after your question is asked so we don't mistakenly think you have another question. Should we not get to your question today, you can always email it to me at jmccabe@ansi.org and we'll try to get you an answer. It is our intention to make the presentations such as they are today available unless a speaker requests otherwise. Be mindful of the fact that we are recording today's sessions. We have a full day from 11 to 5. We will be taking breaks from 12:45 to 1:30 Eastern. That will be our lunch break, and then that will be right before the second panel, and then we'll have another break mid-afternoon from 2:40 to 3 p.m. So let me take this opportunity now to introduce Joe Bhatia, ANSI's President and CEO. Joe, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jim. And good morning, everyone. As you heard, my name is Joe Bhatia, and I'm the President and CEO of ANSI, the American National Institute. Before I go any further, I just want to check in with Jim to see if
I can hear you loud.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Joe. Thanks.
All right, let's proceed. So let me start by, for more than a century, ANSI has really provided neutral forum for all affected parties, and that's what we do. We create an assembly, which is a neutral activity. We've done that, including industry, government, academia, and others, to work together on standards-based solutions. And we cover all types of spectrum that have powerful and real-world impact, and those that address the most pressing issues facing the U.S. and the world. So through our network of members, ANSI represents the interests of more than 270,000 companies, organizations, and 30 million professionals worldwide. And we operate in many, many sectors of industry. ANSI also serves the official representative role to two of the largest and most recognized international standardizing bodies. And I'm sure you know about these. This is ISO, which is International Organization for Standardization, and we are our U.S. National Committee of ANSI in the IEC, which is called International Electrotechnical Commission. And we work very closely with both of these very prominent and very impactful groups on not only technology and standards and conformity assessment areas, but also on the policy activities, which are just as critical. It must be said that U.S. competitiveness in the global economy is closely related to our leadership and influence in the development and use of the standards and the related conformity assessment activities, both domestically and internationally. Because just about everything these days is an international initiative. The collaborative standardization system with broad expert engagement from both the public and the private sectors has a tremendous impact on our nation's strength, safety, and prosperity. And it is an essential link with the U.S. technological leadership around the globe. Now, we have a very successful track record at ANSI of convening stakeholders and serving as a neutral facilitator to address emerging technologies and national and global priorities. from issues as diverse as homeland security, nanotechnology, and unmanned aircraft systems, additive manufacturing, and many, many, many more. And depending on the need, we have convened standalone workshops and ongoing collaborative activities as the one that we're going through right now in the early stages of development. Now, whatever the model is, the goal remains the same, and that is to facilitate cross-sector dialogue to enable the most impactful solutions possible. This past January, ANSI convened a half-day meeting exploring the need for coordination with respect to standardization and the commercial space industry. And subsequently, ANSI issued a survey inviting feedback on key priorities, areas needing coordination, and the topics that should be addressed or could be addressed at an ANSI meeting, be they one or more. All of the input has led to today's event that we're all participating in. Our program today features subject matter experts from government, from industry, from non-governmental organizations, from academia, and more. And all those folks have come to share their perspectives on policy instruments, industry standards, and best practices related to interrelated topics of three things. Number one, space, situational, and domain awareness. Number two, space traffic coordination and management. Number three, orbital debris mitigation. Each of these three panels will today explore the interrelationship of policy instruments, industry standards, and best practices. What exists, what's in development, and what more is needed, and where the gaps are. The overreaching purpose of this dialogue is to raise awareness of relevant activity and to facilitate dialogue on coordination and participation in the standard setting. The past year really has been an exciting one for the space industry. Just over 3 weeks ago, the SpaceX Crew Dragon transported 4 astronauts into the International Space Station, ISS, for a 6-month mission under NASA's Commercial Crew Program. An earlier Crew Dragon flight in May of this year was the first one to carry 2 astronauts from the U.S. soil to the ISS since the end of Space Shuttle program, which was a long time ago stopped in July 2011. Additionally, crew and cargo missions to the ISS are being planned now. Also in November, California-based rocket launched 30 satellites into space orbit from its New Zealand launch site. Most of the satellites were small communication satellites, but others included a space junk removal test, a maritime observation satellite, and an earthquake investigation satellite. In addition, the rocket booster came back to Earth in a parachute-aided ocean splashdown, like the old times, only the second company in the history to achieve that feat. Now, the name of the mission was very appropriately titled, Return to the Sender. Also in November, the National Reconnaissance Office launched an intelligence gathering satellite based abroad, United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket, with help from the U.S. Space Force Mission and Space Systems Center. ULA has successfully launched 141 missions to date, including a Mars 2020 mission for NASA and the first mission for the U.S. Space Force earlier this year. These are just some of the exciting recent developments within the space industry. I'm sure many of you know about a few others as well. Now, according to the data from Space Foundation, 2019 space program globally, the economy of that grew more than $9 billion over the previous year, reaching $423 billion last time. Global launch attempts have increased 39% in the last decade, with 103 launch attempts in 2019, averaging almost 2 every week. And 82 countries in the world now have spacecraft in the orbit. While all of this growth is inspiring, it creates new challenges for all of us in terms of increased congestion, increased space debris, and the need for space traffic management. These are among the issues that we will address today. Of course, safety in all of this is paramount to all of these activities. And safety is our main focus almost all the time. A sound public policy framework supported by voluntary consensus standards and industry's best practices are the key ingredients needed to ensure a safe space ecosystem for all. On the policy front, there have been several notable developments this year. In April, FCC issued a report in order updating Commission satellite rules on the orbital debris mitigation for the first time in over 15 years. FCC also sought public comment on proposals related to mitigating orbital debris. In August, National Academy of Public Administration, NAPA, released a congressionally directed report which reaffirmed the Commerce Department Office of Space Commerce, OSC, is the best suited civil agency to perform space traffic management, or STM, tasks consistent with the intent of Space Policy Directive 3. Now, efforts are underway to obtain the congressional appropriations needed for the OSC to fulfill this critical mission. In September, the White House released Space Policy Directive 5, calling on federal departments and agencies to foster practices within the government space operations and across commercial space industry that will protect space assets and support infrastructure from cyber threats. And in October, Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, issued its final rule to streamline licensing requirements for commercial space transportation launches and reentries. We expect to hear more about these and related developments today. Also today, the success of our meeting will be greatly enhanced by the active information sharing and participation. So I request you to please express your ideas, as we want this to be an interactive discussion. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today. More than 3 years ago, President signed an executive order reviving National Space Council, which had effectively ceased operations in 1993. Chaired by the Vice President, the Council advises and assists the President on national space policy and strategy. Its members include cabinet-level heads of various executive departments and agencies, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and other senior administration officials. Colonel Curtis Hernandez is the Director of National Security Space Policy at the National Space Council. Colonel Hernandez advises Vice President and the Executive Secretary of the National Space Council on national security policy implications to military space capabilities. Further, he directs interagency representatives to modify or create national policy as it relates to the United States military and commercial use and access to space. Known to his colleagues as Scraps, Colonel Hernandez is a decorated veteran whose previous assignment was commander of the 30th Operations Group at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. If I may address you as Scraps, the floor is yours. At this point, please take the mic. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. I hope everybody can hear me on the line. Jim, if you could confirm that, I'll continue with my remarks.
We can hear you loud and clear, Curtis.
Fantastic. Thanks again, and good morning to fantastic. Good morning again to all participants online. It's an honor and privilege to be asked and given an opportunity to speak to this forum. Thanks again to Jim McCabe and Joe Bhatia and American National Standards Institute for hosting today's conversation on standardization of the commercial space industry. As you'll see in my remarks, standards development is a critical component of national space policy, and I'll be going into that as we go through this morning's discussion. I'm particularly excited that this conversation is happening for space situational awareness, space domain awareness, space traffic coordination management, and orbital debris mitigation. First, I want to extend greetings from the Executive Director of the National Space Council, Dr. Scott Pace, and the Chairman of the National Space Council, Vice President Mike Pence. As mentioned earlier, I am Colonel Kurt Hernandez, go by Scraps, so please, if you ever find me in in the market sometime soon, by all means, call me Scraps. I am currently the Director of National Security Space Policy on the National Space Council staff. During my 25 years serving the nation in the United States Air Force and now the United States Space Force, I have had the amazing opportunity to witness the evolution and integration of tactical space systems into combat operations, and I've also had the unique fortune to have directed 22 launch campaigns, including the first land recovery of a lower stage rocket on the West Coast and the first interplanetary mission launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. And now, as we're witnessing and demonstrating the potential to recover and use space resources, an endeavor to commercialize operations on the International Space Station, and a proven commercial capability to conduct on-orbit servicing and active orbital debris removal, I have the incredible privilege to participate in national decision and policy-making processes during perhaps the most exciting and consequential period for America's interest in space since the United States decided to go to the moon in 1961. That decision, 59 years ago, guided the United States to lead the greatest expedition in history, the landing of humans on another celestial body. The aspiration to expand humanity's presence beyond the Earth led the United States to focus national will and government resources to generate the technologies, capabilities, and expertise necessary to fulfill that goal. And since Apollo, the United States government has capitalized on that investment by deploying space-based capabilities that strengthen national security, stimulate economic growth, and enhance the quality of life for all Americans. It has been this drive, this curiosity, and an abundance of imagination that has made it possible to maintain a human presence in low Earth orbit for the past 20 years. And now it's that imagination and drive with the commercial purpose and private investment that brings us here together today. In my opinion, the space industry is at an inflection point. We are witnessing a remarkable growth and metamorphosis of traditional roles within the industry. New rocket companies, new mega constellations, the deployment of hundreds of satellites from a single launcher, and the privatization of traditionally government space operations are just some of the examples of this change, making headlines with a rapidity that is both amazing and inspiring. I would offer that with the increasing commercialization and decreasing costs of space operations, we are on the cusp of capitalizing on the enormous market potential in space, similar to the potential which caught the imagination of entrepreneurs and investors when the New World was discovered in the 1400s. The author Samuel Eliot Morison best captures this concept in his 1942 work, Admiral of the Sea, and I quote, "A new envisagement of the world has begun, and men are no longer sighing after the imaginary golden age that lay in the distant past, but speculating as to the golden age that might possibly lie in the oncoming future." Recognizing this potential and looking to focus the nation's effort to make commercialized space a reality, President Trump revived the National Space Council in 2017, which had been dormant since 1993. In his executive order, the president directed the council to foster close coordination, cooperation, and technology and information exchange among the civil, national security, and commercial space sectors. The EO led to a series of foundational policies that are charting the course for America's future in space and identify a role in which ANSI's unique focus on coordinating the establishment and adoption of voluntary standards can play a significant role. The first action the National Space Council took on focused America's intent to reinvigorate human space exploration. Working within the framework of the 2010 National Space Policy, the President directed the executive branch in SPD-1 on December 11, 2017, to lead an innovative and sustainable program of exploration with commercial and international partners to enable human expansion across the solar system and to bring back to Earth new knowledge and opportunities. Beginning with missions beyond low Earth orbit, the United States will lead the return of humans to the moon for long-term exploration and utilization, followed by human missions to Mars and other destinations. As many of you know, this action resulted in our goal to return the next American man and take the first American woman to the moon in 2024. This also generated a discussion in the nation's approach to building the systems necessary to achieve the goal and resulted in NASA's Artemis program and New Era document that, alongside international participation, encourages government partnership with commercial innovators to achieve this bold target date. Acknowledging that regulations can stifle the necessary innovation and growth for the commercialization of space, SPD2, issued on May 24, 2018, addressed the administration's intent to streamline our approach to launch and reentry licensing, commercial remote sensing, radio frequency spectrum, and export licensing regulations. Further, this SPD proposed to create within the Department of Commerce an entity responsible for commercial space flight activities. Behind the scenes on the development of SPD2, the Space Council was tackling the challenge of addressing orbital debris and space traffic management, anticipating emerging commercial ventures such as satellite servicing, debris removal, in-space manufacturing and tourism, as well as new technologies enabling small satellites and very large constellations of satellites. On June 18, 2018, the President issued SPD3, the National Space Traffic Management Policy. As this audience is keenly aware, SPD3 guides the executive branch's effort to mitigate orbital debris by directing the development of standards and practices, improving space situational awareness interoperability, provision of basic SSA and STM services to the public, and encouragement and facilitation of commercial leadership in SSA and STM. With that foundation supporting the growth of commercial industry in space, the administration turned its attention to the strategic concern of how the nation should defend its interests in space, resulting in the February 19, 2019 publication of SPD4 and eventual establishment of the United States Space Force nearly 1 year ago. Charged with ensuring unfettered use of space for United States national security purposes, the United States economy, and United States persons, partners, and allies, the establishment of the Space Force follows a fundamental understanding that space is now a warfighting domain. This is evidenced by competitors' pursuits of technology that threaten our interest in space and amplify risks to a number of space operators. And let me be clear, the results of today's discussion and ANSI's role in facilitating the establishment, adoption of standards for SSA, SDA, and STM and orbital debris mitigation is perhaps one of the most important aspects of differentiating hostile activities from benign space operations. Finally, understanding that space operations rely on computer-based technology and the potentially decimating impact a malicious cyber attack could have on our national goals to grow a commercial presence in space, our strategic goal to send humans to Mars, and our national security and daily livelihood of millions of Americans, shoring up our ability to withstand potential cyber threats and attacks became critically necessary. Addressing this vulnerability, President Trump issued the SPD5, the nation's first comprehensive cybersecurity policy for space systems. Designed to guide and serve as the foundation for the U.S. approach to the cyber protection of space systems, this SPD fosters practices within government and commercial space operations that protect space assets and their supporting infrastructure from cyber threats. SPD5 directs U.S. government agencies to work with commercial companies consistent with the principles in the SPD to further define best practices, establish cybersecurity-informed norms, promote improved cybersecurity behaviors across the nation's industrial space for space systems. As I mentioned earlier, it is my belief that we are at an inflection point in the commercial space sector. With a high number of new entrants, the rapid entrepreneurial delivery of new technology, and the desire to bridge this technology with a demanding market, we have the high potential for divergence of standards and practices that at best could delay attainment of goals or at worst result in an on-orbit disaster. In relation to SSA and STM, we observe this today as we ponder basic questions such as what are appropriate commercial data sharing standards? How should multiple data sources be curated to derive actionable information? How can openness and transparency be maintained? What are the appropriate standards that trigger conjunction notification? What are appropriate operational standards that contribute to responsible behaviors in space? Do the standards we are considering stimulate participation in mitigation practices? I am encouraged and excited that ANSI is sponsoring today's discussion. As referenced in my remarks, establishing appropriate standards is a key component of success for national space policy. In emphasizing a principal component of ANSI's purpose, we agree that collaboratively working to establishing voluntary standards will help to increase efficiency, open markets, boost consumer confidence, and reduce costs as the nation moves forward in capitalizing on the potential of an emerging commercial space industry. And with that, I'm open to any questions or further comments going into today's further discussions.
Thank you so much, Colonel Hernandez. As a reminder to folks, you can either type in the chat, send it to all panelists, please. Colonel Hernandez is just on the telephone, and/or you can raise your hand and ANSI staff will unmute you. So if you have any questions, we have about 5 minutes. Michelle, are there any hands raised from among attendees?
There are not.
Okay. Are there any panelists who would like to unmute themselves and ask a question of Colonel Hernandez? Joe, you wanted to say something? Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much for great comments this morning. I just have a very practical question. Do you see with the administration change and with the new team coming in of people, experts working on obviously their own new mandates and perhaps some adjustments to it, do you see this moving as per the planned activities and as per our planned agenda that we are looking to advance? Is there anything we can do to support you and your initiatives on that front? Because we also work very closely with various federal agencies, as you know, which are going to be going through a transition, which is a normal behavior that happens after every election. I'm just wondering if there would be anything different that we need to think about and add or modify as we go forward. I would appreciate your feedback on that, please.
Absolutely, Joe. Thanks for the question. Well, I can't comment precisely on what the Biden administration is potentially thinking on space. I know we've had several comments with a number of folks who are participating in assisting the Space Matters on their transition team, but these are past conversations, not as part of the transition. That said, I would offer that in my time here as a staff member on the National Space Council, I've observed a unique bipartisan support for many of the endeavors and activities that we are doing, to include the publication of policy that straddle the aisles, if you would. So there's a lot of active participation from both sides of the political spectrum on this, and we are hoping that we can sustain and maintain the momentum that we have in improving America's position in the space economy.
Yeah, if I may add one more thought, I think you'll hear this word perhaps today during discussions, especially from those who come from ANSI or our constituency. We firmly believe in public-private partnership. We feel the best successes can be advanced in this nation by public sector and private sector working together. And ANSI having a leadership role in standards development, compliance, market, technology development, implementation issues, and all the related input that comes in from new technologies and perhaps new risks also of the problems. We will be very happy to support input that you may be able to use to make sure that there's a reinforcement and advancement from both segments of our existence, public and private, and effectively create the solutions that we're all seeking. So I just want to share that with you because I'm not sure if that would come up in the panel discussion, but it's a foundational issue that everyone should be aware of, that we are very eager and very anxious and hopefully very much dedicated to working together as a team, not as a top-down system that may exist in some countries or a private sector dominated system that may be expressed as a desire by some. So in any way, shape, or form, if we can assist you on a broader front in that regard, please count us in.
Greatly appreciate that, Joe. And I think when we look at SPD3, it definitely highlights the potential for the agility of the private sector to incorporate new tools and methodologies for conducting these activities. At the same time, I think there's good governance that comes from the structure that government agencies can provide. So I agree with you on the public-private partnership. There's great potential that we as a nation can capitalize, especially in the development of standards. I appreciate ANSI's promotion of voluntary adoption, if you would, of these standards, and it's important for us to maintain that space as we go forward in voluntary participation and development of these standards overall. And I'm looking forward to the outcome of today's discussion and see what can come of it. I'm very positive on where this is headed.